Hi friends, I'm Bryn.
And I'm Egg.
And this is Friends Who Crime. Friends Who Crime. Hi everyone. Before I introduce you to my guest today, I wanted to ask you guys to please leave the podcast a 5-star review on streaming services. It's a great way to help the podcast grow, and it takes like 10 seconds. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, send me a message on Insta at Friends Who Crime. Speaking of guests, Egg.
Hello.
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 How are you?
I'm great. It's lovely to be on the podcast finally after texting me, a month and a half ago, and I responded 2 weeks later?
Yeah. Yeah, and you saw me in person, and you were like, oh, your text. I was like, that was literally 2 weeks ago.
Yes. Those are typical response times.
So, for listeners that don't know you, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Egg is a nickname based off my last name. I'm not actually an egg.
You're not?
I'm a person. I'm a human being.
How did I not know this?
Okay. Bryn and I met in college through some mutual music friends. I work in robotics. I do software. And in my free time, I play a lot of video games and take pictures of the stars.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Those pictures are so cool. Tonight's a strawberry moon.
It is. I saw that.
Are you going to take pictures of it?
I probably am not.
Oh.
It's looking a little cloudy.
It is, actually.
Maybe.
I think they said it was going to be hard to see from here. Egg is housemates with Brayden, who was on the Coffee Killer episode.
Good episode.
Which is episode
6.
Is it 6?
I'm guessing.
It's 5.
Ooh, I was
you were
close.
so close.
I was close.
And also, what is your relationship to true crime?
So, I'm not a true crime person by I listen to all the podcasts and whatnot. I have been getting into it a little bit with Friends Who Crime.
You're welcome.
Thank you. But I've always had a fascination with kind of the morbid and crime stories. I remember when I was really young, sneaking around into the kitchen to peep into the family room and watch like when the parents were watching 2020 or Dateline NBC, those kind of shows, which I guess are the precursor to podcast true crime.
Yeah, for sure.
I do listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, which is basically historical true crime.
Yeah.
I listened to an episode recently about some crazy, like, way out there Christian cult leaders in the Renaissance Reformation era who took over a whole town and killed a bunch of people, and one of them claimed he was speaking directly to God in real time.
Of course he did.
Crazy stuff. Everyone died, basically.
Wow.
But, yeah, that was... So, I'm interested in it. I'm fascinated with it. But I'm not generally listening to true crime podcasts or the sort.
Well, welcome to the podcast world.
Thank you.
So for my Brinterruption today, it's a little bit of a heavier one today. There are some really horrible, awful things going on across the country right now, especially in LA, and I know this episode comes out a week from today when we're actually recording it, but I think it's really important to talk about it anyway. Don't know where we're going to be in a week, but we will see. If you are unaware of what's happening, there are ICE raids going on, and the National Guard has been illegally unleashed upon LA, and there have been over 200 citizens detained. People have been hurt, some people have been essentially tortured, tear gas has been used on peaceful protesters, and that list goes on. I just want everyone to know that you have rights that can protect you legally. Please look those up. That information is really easy to find right now. And just in case you need it, the ACLU Immigration Rights Hotline is 1-888-507-2970. I know it's not fun to talk about this stuff, but I felt it was necessary. And now let's get into today's case. Are you ready, Egg?
I am.
This case is brutal, but it's also infuriating. and it's my first serial killer case on the podcast.
Very exciting.
We are talking about an absolute monster who should have been locked away forever, but thanks to a series of systematic failures, he was unleashed back onto the streets of Texas.
Ooh.
Yeehaw.
Right in the backyard.
Right in the backyard, literally. Just you wait. There have been several highway killers in different parts of the country throughout time. Larry Eiler, who terrorized the Midwest in the 80s, he had like 21 victims. But our guy, Kenneth Allen McDuff, had his own personal hunting ground, the infamous I-35 corridor in Texas.
Driven up and down there a few times.
Just a few, right?
Yeah. They never seem to finish construction.
Ever. They were still doing construction when this story was taking place. If you live in Texas, you know that I-35 is literally a nightmare in itself, and traffic is always bad, and your drive goes from 15 minutes to 45 minutes very quickly. And this guy, McDuff, decided to make it even worse. Kenneth Allen McDuff, born on January 24th of 1946 and finally put down on November 17th, 1998, earned himself a truly grim couple of nicknames. Some people have heard of the Broomstick Murderer. That's also his nickname. He's more well known as the I-35 killer now. His criminal career wasn't just long, it was extremely violent. He had a disturbing knack for manipulating the system meant to contain him. This story is heavy for sure, and I'll give a typical trigger warning for sexual assault before we get started. Every villain has an origin story, and Kenneth Allen McDuff's began in Rosebud, Texas. He was the fifth of 6 kids born to John Allen and Addie McDuff. Now, his dad ran a pretty successful concrete business, very fitting for Texas.
Yep.
So on the surface, it seemed like a pretty stable upbringing. But if you peel back that veneer, you find a childhood that was really anything but normal. McDuff was notoriously indulged by his family, especially his mom, who apparently earned the nickname Pistol Packin' Mama.
Pistol, that's the most Texas nickname you could possibly have.
And you want to know why she got it? After allegedly threatening a school bus driver with a pistol.
Oh, well, a school bus driver, you know, they probably had it coming, helping children and everything get to their education.
Can you imagine, though?
That was sarcasm, for the record.
Yeah, I would say so. But this kind of like permissive environment where like the bus driver maybe said a comment to him and then his mom was like, "Don't mess with my son," you know? It's where boundaries were probably very loosey-goosey and might have inadvertently watered the seeds of his antisocial tendencies. Yep. From a shockingly early age, he was a walking red flag. At Rosebud High, he quickly cemented his reputation as a bully, always picking on the weaker kids, especially after he got his butt handed to him by an athletic and popular boy named Tommy Sammons.
Good job, Tommy Sammons. Preemptive justice.
Right? So McDuff eventually dropped out of high school and went to work for his dad. Accounts from back then describe a consistent pattern of disciplinary problems, laughing at totally inappropriate times, stealing. He would brag about totally made up stories that he presented. And these weren't just isolated incidents, they were like glaring neon signs pointing to a deeply disturbed personality. And here's a weird, almost pathetic detail that really highlights this warped self-perception. He later bragged that, quote, "old ladies loved how he mowed their lawns."
Oh.
It's bizarre.
Wow. That's just a really strange claim to make.
Right? And it's almost this like dichotomy of the need for approval externally, but also having a really violent nature. It's like that's a weird dichotomy, that one.
I feel like there's some psychological trope here. Something probably Freudian.
Probably. Isn't everything?
Yeah.
His rap sheet started early. In 1964, only 18 years old, McDuff was slapped with 12 counts of burglary and attempted burglary across 3 Texas counties.
An even dozen. Very nice.
I
Filled the
guess.
whole egg carton. Sorry, I'm just constantly coming up with egg-based puns in my head. I guess.
Just like a word bank of egg jokes.
Yeah. I've heard them all at this point.
Excellent. Okay, so burglary. He got 12 concurrent 4-year prison terms, but he was paroled in December of 65. So he was only in there for like a year. Here was McDuff, a known criminal with escalating antisocial behaviors, repeatedly being let back into society. The progression from bullying and petty theft to like a lack of empathy, he's a developing psychopath for sure.
Yep.
This early trajectory tragically foreshadowed the remorseless violence he would later unleash, screaming about a missed opportunity for intervention that could have prevented a lot of suffering. August 6th, 1966 is when the true horror of Kenneth McDuff's nature burst forth. Barely a year after his parole for burglary, 19-year-old McDuff and his accomplice Roy Dale Green were just driving around, with McDuff casually stating he was, quote, looking for a girl. At 10 p.m. in Everman, Texas, they spotted 3 teenagers on a baseball field. 17-year-old Robert Brand, his 16-year-old girlfriend Edna Louise Sullivan, and Brand's 15-year-old cousin Mark Dunham.
And how old was our suspect at this time?
19.
19.
So not that much older than they were. Yeah. McDuff, armed with a .38 Colt revolver, wasted no time. He threatened the terrified trio and forced them into the trunk of their own car. He then drove their car to a secluded field with Green following in McDuff's vehicle. In an act of bone-chilling, cold-blooded violence, McDuff ordered Sullivan, the girl, out of the trunk and into Green's car. Then, despite her pleading cries and the cries from Dunham and Brand, McDuff fired 6 shots into the trunk of their car, brutally ending both boys' lives.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
And the friend, Mr. Green, just... What was his first name? He just went along with this?
Roy
It's
Green.
like, oh, you're gonna pull a gun and force people into a trunk? Cool prank.
Yeah. I don't think he knew what was happening. I don't think he knew that that's where the night was heading. Wow. But, now he's...
It's a rapid escalation.
Yes. And it only gets worse, really. So after he shoots the boys, he very calmly, instructed Green to wipe fingerprints off the car in an attempt to cover their tracks. But it didn't stop there. After driving to another isolated location, McDuff and Green repeatedly raped Edna Sullivan, both of them. When McDuff decided it was time to silence her permanently, he asked Green for something to strangle her with. Green offered his belt, but McDuff, ever the connoisseur, opted for a 3-foot piece of broomstick he had in his car. He choked her with such savage force that it broke her neck.
Oh, wow.
Her lifeless body was then just dumped in some bushes. The callousness and casualness of it all, followed by them actually going to a convenience store and buying a Coca-Cola and then just going to Green's house to hang out.
So Roy just went along with this. He was in for that kind of... I don't know how to describe it.
Like I said, I don't think he knew what was going on. I don't think he realized that's where the night was headed, but he leaned into it a little bit. Yeah.
Lost all, what's the word? Brain broke. Plausible deniability.
Okay.
Lost all plausible deniability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're at Green's house. McDuff had no remorse, didn't show any emotion, which is, again, hallmark of psychopathy. Psychopathy. He has an infamous quote that makes me want to, like, projectile vomit onto my floor.
Try not to.
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to, but... Quote, "Killing a woman's like killing a chicken. They both squawk."
Oh, wow.
Blech.
Blech, indeed.
He just had, like, zero respect for his victims or for women in general, and this initial crime wasn't just, like, a one-off crime. Like, this is just an appetizer, really.
He got the taste.
Something like that. I don't like that word.
I don't know. It came out of my mouth and now I'm regretting it.
So for these crimes, he was caught. And he was sentenced to death in Texas's electric chair. Green, his accomplice, got a 25-year sentence and was released in 1979. At this point, it seemed like justice had been served, and the nightmare of McDuff's reign was over. But that is not correct. On June 29th, 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court drops a bombshell with its Furman v. Georgia ruling. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
So this decision was this, like, broad legal reform that effectively voided 40 death penalty statutes across the country and suspended the death penalty, leading to the reduction of 629 death sentences nationwide.
Do you know what the reasoning behind that?
The Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment.
Okay.
So that happened. McDuff, the triple murderer condemned to death, had his sentence commuted to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole.
Okay. Clearly that possibility panned out.
So this proven, extremely violent killer was handed a second chance at freedom. And these, like, sweeping legal changes can have unforeseen, like, unintentional outcomes when there aren't safeguards in place.
Yep.
Despite his heinous crimes, McDuff somehow became eligible for parole, and the parole process was a masterclass in systemic weakness. His mother, Addie, was an advocate for his release, shelling out, like, over $2,000 for expenses to attorneys to evaluate, finger quotes, evaluate his prospect of release. McDuff even tried to bribe a parole board member during a one-on-one interview.
That's just kind of a crime, right? McDuff, his mother, tried to bribe, or
No, he did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he attempted to commit a crime in his parole proceedings.
Where he's trying to...
And they were like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much.
Who wouldn't try to bribe their way out?
It's the audacity, right? But he did receive a 2-year sentence for doing this.
Oh, okay. Well.
Which is still kind of measly. It's a measly 2-year sentence for a man who's up for parole. That bribery attempt didn't ultimately prevent his release. The fact that a known manipulator who had already demonstrated what he did could exploit the system through illicit means or undue influence definitely uncovers this critical flaw, the first one. This wasn't just a one-off mistake. It pointed to the parole board either being corruptible, incompetent, or both. And they let a truly dangerous person back into society.
Yep.
December 18th of 1990 is when he walks out of prison. He had served 23 years for taking 3 young people's lives. He managed to snag a job at a gas station, making a cool $4 an hour, and enrolled in classes at Texas State Technical College in Waco.
Okay.
The sheer absurdity of a man who literally broke a girl's neck with a broomstick, now pumping gas down the street. It's just like, it's too much.
23 years.
Mm-hmm.
That, I feel like that's a sentence you can get for, like, accidental murder, like manslaughter type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy got it for triple murder and sexual assault.
Right.
Wild incompetence.
Yeah.
Or just people who didn't feel like doing their jobs that day, which I guess is the same thing.
Or both. So this didn't go unnoticed, right? Like, this was kind of a big deal. Texas Monthly wrote an article. Gary Cartwright was the author, and it was titled Free to Kill, published in August of 92, that highlighted the failures of the system that enabled McDuff's freedom. The article and reviews of the book Bad Boy from Rosebud explicitly state that the weak and underfunded Texas penal system provided multiple opportunities for McDuff to be freed. The most infuriating, soul-crushing aspect of Kenneth McDuff's story is that his second reign of terror was entirely preventable. And here's the kicker. It's widely believed that McDuff began killing again within 3 days of his release.
Wow. So he was truly just gaming the system to get out and start doing it again.
Yep.
While pumping gas.
Literally.
Wild.
This immediate return to violence wasn't just a coincidence. It was like a screaming siren goat.
Screaming siren goat. Imagine if we just taped goats to the top of ambulances.
It would work.
PETA would be a little unhappy, I think.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Most people
The
would
goats.
probably.
The goats would probably be unhappy too.
Yeah.
But yes, it was a screaming siren goat about his uncontrollable bloodlust. His second spree, concentrated primarily along the I-35 corridor in Texas, saw him rape and kill at least 6 women, though he's believed to be responsible for 9 to 14 additional victims.
Jeez. And that's over what time period?
From like 89 to 92.
Oh, he had free reign for 3 years. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
To truly grasp the horror of this like second act of his crimes, let's walk through his victims. These aren't just names on a list. They're vibrant lives that were savagely cut short, lives that should have been safe, and most of them were in their like 20s. A few of them were in their like 30s, like 35, 36. Mm-hmm. But young all people. Very young, yeah.
A lot of life ahead of them.
October 14th of 1989, Seraphia Parker, her beaten and strangled body was discovered in a field along the I-35 corridor in Temple. McDuff was never charged with this crime, but it's widely believed that she was his very first victim after his release. The next victim was Brenda Thompson. On October 10th, 1991, McDuff picked her up in Waco. He tied her up and stopped his truck about 50 feet from a police checkpoint. When an officer approached, Brenda, in a desperate bid for freedom, kicked and cracked the windshield. So McDuff, in a brazen move, accelerated and drove directly at the officers, evading them by turning off his lights and driving the wrong way on one-way streets.
He blew through a police stop with a hostage in his car and was not caught because it was dark.
And he had his lights off.
That's just... Oh, God. You said preventable.
He then tortured her to death. Her body wasn't found until 1998, hidden in a wooded area near Route 84. Just 5 days after Brenda Thompson's murder, McDuff was seen arguing with Regina Moore at a Waco motel. They drove off in his pickup truck to a remote area near Highway 6. There, McDuff tied her arms and legs with stockings before killing her. Her body wasn't found until September 1998, 7 years later. On September 21st, 1991, Cynthia Renee Gonzalez's body was discovered in a creek bed near County Road 313, just a mile west of I-35, after she was reported missing from Arlington. She, too, is believed to be one of McDuff's victims, but he was never charged. His next victim was Colleen Reed on December 29th, 1991. This one is particularly horrifying, so if you don't want to hear it and want to skip ahead, do that now. It'll take me like 15 seconds. Colleen was kidnapped in plain sight from an Austin car wash by McDuff and his accomplice Alva Hank Worley. McDuff literally grabbed her by the throat and dragged her into the back seat. As Worley drove north on I-35, McDuff bound Colleen's hands, torturing her with lit cigarettes inserted into her vagina, and repeatedly raped her. Awful. Horrific.
Yeah, it's...
worst nightmare.
I don't even have words to... Yeah.
Yep. Worley later claimed her screams, quote, hurt his ears. Aw, poor thing. Shut up. McDuff then crushed her neck. Her body has never been found, but it's believed to be buried near McDuff's parents' home.
Do we know that by testimony from the accomplice?
Yes.
That... Okay.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
On February 24th, 1992, Valencia Joshua was last seen knocking on McDuff's door in Waco. He strangled her. Her body was found on March 15th at a golf course near Texas State Technical College, where both she and McDuff were students. And we don't know if she was there to, like, study or why she was really there at all, but she knocked on his door and she disappeared.
So he was pumping gas, going to school, killing people on the weekends, I guess.
And weekdays.
Busy man.
Truly. His schedule is packed.
And that one where he kidnapped her in broad daylight, was that reported to police when it happened? Did they send people after them?
Yes. It was reported. People saw it happen. But he drove out to a remote area pretty quickly because he had an accomplice driving the car.
Yep.
So they were able to just, like, get on I-35 and book it out of there.
I-35. Shocking they were able to get far.
I know, that's true. And the last one here is March 1st of 1992. Melissa Northrup was kidnapped from the Waco Quick Pack that she worked at. $250 was stolen from the register. She was pregnant with her third child. McDuff strangled her with a rope, and her body was found on April 26th in a Dallas County gravel pit, her hands still tied behind her back.
Wow.
So that's really like 2 in 1. She was pregnant.
Yeah, that's capital murder, I think, is...
Oh, for sure.
What happens there?
McDuff's post-release crimes weren't just a continuation, they were an escalation. While the 1966 broomstick murders involved a degree of concealment, with victims forced into trunks and driven to remote locations, this second spree showcased, like, an increased brazenness. He was getting cocky.
Yep.
The kidnapping of Colleen Reed, for instance, happened in plain sight of eyewitnesses at a car wash, like we were saying. And the methods of torture became more sadistic and prolonged, as evidenced by the gruesome details of Colleen Reed's torture with cigarettes. This isn't just a guy who didn't learn his lesson, this is a guy who got worse. His time behind bars didn't deter him. It seems to have either hardened him or allowed his sadism and sense of impunity to fully manifest, leading to a more brazen and utterly depraved MO.
I feel like there's something to be said here about the just utter failings of the penal system in the U.S.
Yeah.
Just beyond the parole and not recognizing that and letting him out, just the complete failure to rehabilitate in any meaningful way whatsoever. I can imagine that being in prison probably could have that effect of, if you have some sort of underlying psychopathy, it hardens you, makes you more brazen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Clearly happened here.
Yes.
I think.
Very clearly. He also weaponized the highway system. The concentration of his crimes near the major interstate means he leveraged its extensive reach for rapid mobility. This allowed him to zip between different cities and counties to commit these horrific acts and then vanish, making it really difficult for the local law enforcement to connect the dots around the different jurisdictions. Like, all of these counties typically weren't talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't realize, it's like, oh, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here. They're all related.
And was he was living in Waco at the time?
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of central, but he could go on trips, I guess, to other counties to do the things.
Austin's not far, Dallas isn't far.
Hour and a half both ways.
Yeah.
Without traffic.
Without traffic, which, like, it's I-35, so, like, probably two and a half hours. Bringing Macduff to justice for his second spree was an immense, almost impossible challenge for law enforcement. The sheer geographical spread of his victims across several Texas counties made a single coordinated investigation a nightmare for various local agencies. And to make matters worse, Macduff was incredibly good at evading police. Remember Brenda Thompson's murder? He drove his truck directly at the officers and escaped. Imagine, like, this is a bad analogy, but trying to catch a ghost who knows all the back roads, isn't afraid to ram a cop car, and whose victims are scattered.
Yeah.
It's like
very tough.
It's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah. And inter-department cooperation is historically, from what I understand, not good.
Great.
I'd imagine it probably took a few years in some cases to even realize that certain cases were connected at all.
A pivotal breakthrough, thankfully, came through the role of accomplices, particularly Alva Wank. My God. Alva Wank Hurley? No. Alva Hank Worley.
It's a real DD Mega Doo-Doo moment right there.
Alva Hank Worley in the Colleen Reed case. Worley's confession was instrumental in building the case against Macduff, even though it presented significant legal hurdles due to the reliance on accomplice testimony and the absence of Reed's body. Worley later claimed he was absolutely terrified of Macduff, which ultimately compelled him to cooperate. The case against Macduff for Colleen Reed's murder was particularly challenging because her body was never found, meaning no direct forensic evidence of the murder itself. However, the detailed testimony of an insider like Worley provided the framework and circumstantial links necessary for prosecution. This was further bolstered by key forensic evidence, like the 5 hairs recovered from Macduff's car that microscopically matched Colleen Reed's known hair, which is crazy.
I didn't know we had, like, non-genetic hair matching as a technology.
Non-genetic hair matching.
Like it sounds like they're just looking at it under a microscope and comparing the structures, I guess.
Yes.
It's interesting.
So. It is interesting. And it was like the one thing that directly tied him to Colleen.
Mm-hmm.
The strategic importance for law enforcement to identify and leverage accomplices, even if they're reluctant or fearful, I can't overstate that. They often hold the key to unlocking, like, the full scope of the crime, especially with serial killers, and providing the, like, narrative missing from physical evidence alone. Despite the glaring systemic failures, I'm going to say that so much because I'm so angry about it, but yeah. So the only reason that this case went through is because of dedicated law enforcement officers that were, like, relentlessly pursuing him. People like J.W. Thompson of the Austin Police Department, Special Agent Chuck Meyer of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the legendary Texas Rangers.
Oh, wow.
The law enforcement, not the baseball team.
Yep.
Spent 3 years ensuring Macduff was finally brought to justice and that the victims' families received some semblance of closure. These are really the unsung heroes of this case, the ones who refused to give up even when the system seemed stacked against them, when the trails went cold, and when the monster they were after seemed untouchable. Even in the face of significant institutional challenges, the dedication, collaboration, and persistence of individual law enforcement officers can make a huge difference in these complex, multi-jurisdictional serial killer cases.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with these kind of cold cases. From my last episode I listened to with your dad, where there were the two guys back in like 2013 that reopened the 40-something-year-old case.
Yeah.
Or 30, I guess.
Yeah. The
Good
cabin murders. The Ketty cabin murders.
I'm glad we have good law enforcement out there sometimes.
Yes. It's the good ones that we need to hang on to, obviously. Yes. May 4th, 1992, Kenneth McDuff was finally apprehended for the last time. It took a grueling 32 years to bring his brutal and heartless crime spree to a fitting end. But Kenneth McDuff was convicted of capital murder for the kidnapping, aggravated sexual assault, and murder of Colleen Reed. The prosecution built their case, painstakingly piecing together evidence and testimony despite the challenges posed by a missing body. For his post-release crimes, McDuff received another death sentence. This time, there would be no Furman v. Georgia to save him. The system, having failed once with really catastrophic consequences, was absolutely determined not to repeat its mistake, because Jesus Christ, it was a big one.
Yeah. A dozen?
Yeah.
And they only got him for one.
They got him for one. And they used context, sort of, to get that result. So people knew he got it at least 6, but probably like 12 to 14. November 17th of 1998, Kenneth Allen McDuff was executed by lethal injection at the age of 52. His case was a major catalyst for reform, including a dramatic increase in the number of prisons built in Texas and the implementation of stricter systems for deciding parole and enforcing sentences in the mid-1990s. It's a really horrific legacy, but it saved the lives of other women who would have fallen victim to this guy had he not been convicted. Yeah. The tough part about this case is how entirely preventable it was. It's sobering sometimes that the scariest monsters are walking free because of bureaucratic mistakes.
It's also, it's so terrifying to imagine that the guy, I mean, I don't want to put shade on convenience store workers in general, but, you know, generally speaking, it is possible with the system that we have for a genuinely insane person like that to just reintegrate into society. There's something to be said for rehabilitation and, you know, actually healing people when they do stuff like that. But God, that's terrifying that he could just be pumping your gas.
Right.
Right after last weekend, he kidnapped Colleen and did God knows what to her.
And this is why I don't like walking around in the dark.
Yeah.
Or in the light, really.
I mean, I guess the Rainy Street stuff that's been happening has targeted my demographic.
Yes.
So that is also terrifying.
Welcome to my world.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
I wonder about the families of all the other victims.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they probably got closure because they can say, you know, we have some preponderance of evidence that connects this guy to all these murders. But they only got him for the one.
Yeah. And,
you know, you only need the one to get the death penalty in that case. But it feels unfortunate that, you know, I'd imagine he was the primary suspect in these number of cases, and once they convicted him of Colleen's murder, then they could just say, okay, we'll close these cases.
Yeah.
And there's not like full closure, but maybe, I don't know. I can't empathize with the family of someone who's like a murder victim.
Right. But
I wonder if maybe having to go to court is in some ways more traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's impossible to know without being in their shoes, you know? And some of the reasons that he didn't get charged with the other murders is because they didn't find the body until like the year he died. And other ones, I believe, just like didn't have enough evidence. Like Colleen, I don't want to say Colleen was lucky, but like it was lucky that they were able to match her hair to the hair in his car. I think that was like the concrete evidence, and a lot of the other ones didn't have that.
Yeah. And I mean, this was very early stages of forensics, right?
Right.
Started in the 80s, maybe.
And he obviously like kind of knew what he was doing as far as like wiping his fingerprints off of things and making
that
sure.
that was in the 60s. The original one when he asked Roy to wipe the fingerprints.
Well, Egg, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, and sorry it took so long for me to let you pin me down.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm glad we got here, you know. And for the listeners, thanks for being listeners. And this week, take in some sunshine, maybe avoid I-35, and remember, friends don't let friends commit crimes. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.